Hi, this is Kathy, and I am so excited to share this information with you. I have a video that you're about to listen to, and it begins to start a conversation about trauma-informed care, about trauma-informed care and responsiveness. And so watch the video. I hope you get a lot out of it. Certainly let me know what you think of it. Here it is. So the name of the workshop was Empowering the Church to Create Trauma Responsive, Healing Engaged Communities. And the content of the first workshop really was based around providing information about a research study that was done in the late 90s called the ACE study. So hopefully you've heard of the ACE study. It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it was done in the late 90s. And the purpose of the study was to see how stressful and traumatic a childhood experiences influences us later in our lives, both physically and emotionally. So this was done in the late 90s. Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control had two doctors, and they co-facilitated this research, this study. So Dr. Robert Anda and Dr. Vincent Folletti were the co-facilitators of the study. Now, Kaiser Permanente is a large healthcare company on the West Coast. They may be other places, but I know that Kaiser Permanente is really big on the West Coast. So I live in the Midwest, so I would maybe liken them to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I think everybody in the Midwest knows about Blue Cross Blue Shield. So Kaiser Permanente is a large healthcare provider as well. And they are always trying to figure out how to reduce and lower healthcare costs. So these two doctors got together and had the ACE study, completed the ACE study. And there were over 17,000 people who accepted to be in this study. They were all privately insured by Kaiser Permanente. So they had private insurance. They were solidly middle class. They were all Caucasian, and the average age was 57 years old. So the original survey was very, very extensive. It was a really long survey. So they really have now boiled it down to 10 questions, and I provided a copy for you of those 10 questions. You have a copy of the mini ACE survey. And in class, participants in class were actually able to score someone else's life. So we took an example of someone's life, and they were able to score that person on the ACE survey. And they were also able to score themselves if they wanted to. You know, sometimes it's easier, our comfort level goes up when we are looking at someone else's life and someone else's experience in terms of dysfunction and trauma and what they've been through. And sometimes we find less comfort in looking at our own dysfunction. So the whole point is to open up a conversation, to begin to have a conversation about how stress and trauma very early on affects us throughout the span of our life. And it definitely does. And that is what this study proved. 17,000 people, these 10 questions, and they connected the answers with health outcomes. So you have the survey, you can take it, you can look at it, whatever you want to do with it. And just let me say, I'm here giving information. I'm not giving you any type of medical or mental health advice. Certainly, if you have any questions about that, you should contact your doctor or you should contact another licensed professional. I'm giving information and hope that there's value in the things that I'm talking about today. So let's look at the definition of trauma. The definition I'm going to actually use today is from SAMHSA. that is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. And trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So remember the 3 E's of trauma: the event, the experience, and the effect that it has on the person. That is the definition of trauma. And this definition has been expanded as well, but we're not going to talk about that today. Remember, we're just giving a brief synopsis. So the survey looked at trauma in 3 categories: abuse, physical, emotional, or sexual; neglect, physical or emotional; and then household dysfunction. So household dysfunction was looked at and described as living with someone with a mental illness, having an incarcerated relative, if the mother was treated violently, so if there was domestic violence in the home against the mother, substance abuse in the home, and parental separation or divorce. So those are the categories under household dysfunction. So they looked at abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And when you look at the ACE survey, the mini ACE survey that I provided for you, you will find those questions fit in one of those categories. So what were the major findings of the study? The major finding of the studies, findings of the study is that adverse childhood experiences are common. They are very prevalent. Accumulation of ACEs matter. Of course, the higher the score, the higher that person's risk. So that's the way that plays out. So if you have higher ACEs, so when you take the ACE survey, you get 1 point for each of the questions that you answer in the affirmative. And then at the end, that serves as your ACE score. So if you go to, I've also provided just one handout. At the top, it says out of 100 people. So out of 100 people, 33% report no ACEs. 51% report 1 to 3 ACEs, and 16% report 4 to 10 ACEs. And if you look at that handout I have provided, you will see some either behaviors, or you will see some diseases or activities that people engage in correlated with the number of ACEs that individuals have. And this is what the research, this is what the study found when they looked at the childhood histories of those 17,000 people. So that's why I say this study is so important, and it hasn't maybe gained the traction that maybe it should have, because this can really be informative, and it's very important for us to realize, like I said earlier, that stress and trauma have an effect on us, whether we know it or want to acknowledge it or not. So you look at that handout, and it kind of is very striking when you look at the 33% who report no ACEs and compare that to the 16% that with 7 ACEs or more. So those are some findings from the study. Now, I want to put this in perspective, because I don't want people to think that if they take the ACE survey and they have a whole bunch of ACEs, then I'm gonna have a heart attack, or I'm gonna have all these bad health outcomes. So let's just put it in perspective. It is common to score on the survey. ACEs are prevalent in our society. A high score does not necessarily condemn you to a life of issues and problems. But the ACE score and the research can help us understand why we respond to life the way we do. And it can help us have an awareness of our own self. And that awareness can transfer to someone else. If we can understand the effect that trauma and stress has on our lives. So just to put it in perspective, okay, I want to do that. It's very, very important, because you never want someone to feel like, well, I'm just doomed because I had this stuff happen to me, or I was in the environment where these things happened. No, you are not. I also included a copy of a quote that is attributed to Dr. Carl Bell. And you may know of Dr. Bell. He was a noted psychiatrist. He was actually a Chicagoan. Unfortunately, he passed last year in 2019. But he was a noted psychiatrist, and he himself wrote many books and articles, and was like I said, a noted psychiatrist. Actually graduated from Hyde Park High School in Chicago. But this quote is so important when we think about putting the ACE survey in perspective. And the quote is, risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. And that is so true. So what does that mean? It means that just because you may have had some messed up stuff that happened to you, or you may have been in an environment with some of those things in those categories that I shared before, it does not doom you to a bad life. It does not doom you to bad social, emotional, and physical outcomes. And why is that? That is because of protective factors. Protective factors are buffers. Yes. They buffer us from those things in our environment that may cause us stress and trauma. They can be family members. They could be grandparents or neighbors. It could be a caring teacher who takes out more time to give to that student. It could be a coach. It could be human service workers that still have that caring heart and go the extra mile. It could be the faith community that provides pseudo moms and dads and aunts and uncles, and provides experiences that build young people up, let them know they're loved instead of tearing them down. And that's why we have to put the perspective of the survey in the place where it should be, and realize that risk factors are not predictive factors. They don't necessarily predict negativity because of protective factors. And I know that I always want to share that because this is so true. So I talked a little bit about the ACE survey and how it was done back in the late 90s. So there has been some work done since then, and the ACE survey has been expanded. And the Philadelphia ACE Project has expanded the survey. And I just want to give this information briefly to let you know that, yes, that was a long time ago, about 20 years ago, but there's some other expansion that has been done with the survey. So the Philadelphia Project expanded the ACE questions to look at community level adversity. They look at if a person has witnessed violence, felt discrimination. They looked at adverse neighborhood experiences, being bullied, and also living in foster care. So those are the areas that the Philadelphia ACE Project expanded the ACE survey to look at. Okay, so I will probably do another audio to share some information that I did in the second workshop. And the second workshop actually went into ways that faith communities and churches can become trauma informed and responsive themselves. so that we don't re-traumatize people, but we understand how prevalent trauma is. That's about being trauma informed. We understand how prevalent trauma is, and we become a community that provides healing, and we don't re-traumatize people. And we begin to say, instead of saying what is wrong with that person, we begin to say and think about what happened to that person. And so it shifts your focus off of possibly the negative or inappropriate behavior that you may be witnessing or seeing, and it puts your focus on those things that may have happened to really make that person or have something to do with the way that person is acting, especially if we feel like they are acting in a way that is inappropriate. Okay, so let me just finish this up, because I said this was going to be 10 minutes and it's almost 17 minutes right now. But I want to briefly just talk about why is this important? What difference does it make? Why am I discussing it? Well, I'm discussing it because the research bears to witness that the impact of trauma can be long lasting. The impact of trauma can, I believe it accounts for some of the negative things right now happening in our homes and in our communities and even in our churches and other institutions. So the reason that it is important, because the areas affected by trauma and stress are the brain development. Yes, the brain. Stress and trauma can affect a child's cognitive abilities. That means that if a child is living in an environment that has a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, it's probably going to be really difficult for the child to perform at its best in school. So you can't just take a child that's experiencing all of this trauma and expect them when they get to school to turn all of that off and even think and perform. So in class, we went into this a little bit more, talking about how trauma affects the brain and cognitive abilities. And so what is the reason that we do not take trauma into consideration in schools when we have discipline issues, when we have issues with students that in terms of their inability to regulate their emotion? Because emotion regulation is also one of the things that adversely affects, that trauma adversely affects, the ability to regulate your own emotions. And if you know anything about what's happening, let's just take Illinois. We just passed a whole set of laws about preschool expulsion. Yes, preschool expulsion. So before you can expel a child from preschool or daycare, there's this set of whole things that you have to do before you do that. So if we don't take into consideration trauma and stress in the home environment, then are we really trying to solve the problem? And that's one of the reasons I believe that in Tennessee, the governor of Tennessee, in their expulsion laws for preschool and daycare, they have to do an ACE survey on the child before they go to the extent of expelling their child from preschool or daycare. Makes sense to me. So it affects the brain. It affects emotional regulation. It oversensitizes the nervous system. And then certainly it affects the immune system as well. And so I don't even have time to really, that's not what this audio is for. It's just to give you a brief synopsis of what we went over in the first workshop. And like I said, I hope it's valuable to you. certainly reach out to me if you want more information. If you want me to share this information at your church or at your group, reach out to me for that as well. So I hope that you feel like your time has been spent well. I hope that it has added value to you, and hopefully listen again if I do another audio. So thanks and be well.